Welcome to No Question About That. I'm Ed, today with Adam, and we're going to talk about strikers and ticket prices and Omar Berrada's interview with Andy Mitten, Nick Cox leaving, and other stuff. First, Adam, how are you doing?
I'm all right. It's that time of the transfer window, maybe because of the Club World Cup, maybe because it started early, where everything's stagnating in the minds of fans, and we're getting our harsh reality that things just don't happen every day like we wish they would. And it's a little bit tougher to negotiate deals when you don't have that much cash in hand.
Well, yeah, and also everyone's playing chicken with everyone. It just takes a long time. And when you're buying a 60, 70, 80 million pound asset, it takes a long time. The Cunha deal was very rapid, but Wolves had no choice. There was the release clause in there, and most deals don't happen like that. They take a long time, and we are not patient as fans, but we're just hoping they get it right. Right?
I mean, it's all we can hope for. I think the difference as well with Cunha is like you said, with the release clause, there was a strict structure to those payments, whereas United have to be pretty specific with how they want to negotiate payment structures, whether it's putting the fee up just to get it across a longer period of time and things like that. And I'm sure we'll talk about Bryan and Mbeumo. I knew I was going to get it wrong the first time. So I know we'd talked about this previously on the extra. So yeah, it's an interesting time, but I guess we'll get into it in the striker issues and how the club's going to prioritise, because there's a few needs that need to be addressed. There's some anxiety being created by some Andre Onana news, which doesn't guarantee anything. It might just mean there's not a market. But it's hard. You can't ride the wave too hard. You can't ride every high and low. You've just got to...
I would not. I mean, I've said this before, but it's one thing sort of talking and speculating about it. I would not get too emotionally invested in the day-to-day when it comes to transfers. We'll see when it comes to the end of the window. My overriding hope for this window, is not only getting the right players in, but doing it in the right kind of time, for the Tour of the USA, which is in about a month, right? So if in a month's time we've done no further deals, I will get a little bit panicky, and that is heightened a little bit based on the fixture list that came out, which put some pretty tough few fixtures in the first 10 or 8 fixtures of the season, and I would not like United to be going in cold, with 2 or 3 players coming in on the 2nd of September after the third game has been played, and all of that kind of stuff.
Not the traditional window we're used to. Not interested in that.
No. Yeah, nice and professional, nice and early. I mean, we were certainly... it's a week since we've done a pod, and that was a tactics pod. It's 2 weeks since... Or it's nearly a month since the Europa League. We had the Villa game after that, of course. And so, of course, people are getting antsy for stuff to happen. It will happen in time. United are navigating a challenging window. It's challenging from 2 points of view. The finances of the club and the generally widespread knowledge that United don't have loads of money, or flip that round, the sense of desperation of the club that finished trophyless last season and 15th in the league and trying to get back to where we are, right? So there will certainly be other clubs trying to exploit the club, and of course, everyone is out for the best they can get. Anyway, I have a slight cold, so if I'm sounding slightly raspy, or for people of my age, a bit 0898, I apologise. Or maybe I don't, if you like that kind of thing. But we won't get there. Yeah, I only do that in the off season. Honest. All right.
Yeah, maybe you could do an extra.
Yeah. I don't think it would work.
There was an Omar Berrada quote about the speed of things, so I'm curious to read that to you and get your feedback, being that we want to get players in on time. It's a bit of a two sides of the coin argument, so keen to hear about that, but we've got some other things to talk about first.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's go through the fixture list that came out today, UK time, yesterday, as most people are listening to this, which put pretty much everyone in the first 8 fixtures of the season. So we play Arsenal on the opening day. We'll also play Chelsea and City I think it's Fulham second up, isn't it? I mean, there's a whole bunch of really tough fixtures in that opening quarter of the season before November. Do we feel good about that or bad about that? Because in one sense, if you can start well, if we got those players in, we've had the full pre-season, most of the squad's used to Amarim's system, we start like really well. Think of the momentum we could carry into the last 3 quarters of the season. And on the dark side of that is, if it all goes wrong, he's got no credit in the bank and could be gone by November.
Well, funny you say November, obviously, with those first, it's like 3 rounds. We have 3 international breaks in that time. Well, into that November international break, there's Arsenal, Fulham away, Burnley, international break. City away, Chelsea, Brentford away, Sunderland, international break. Liverpool away, Brighton, Forest, Spurs. And those last 2 are away, I think, as well. It's a really tough run. For me, I'm not too asked about having really tough games at the start. Teams are getting the measure of themselves. Teams peak at different times. And you play everyone twice. So I've never really been too bothered about hard starts. It just means an easier run home. And we know in the back end of the season, when teams are competing for league position or trophies or avoiding relegation when you finish 15th in the previous year, yeah, having an easier run in does help. So I tend to look at the upside of that. I don't really care when we play teams this season based on the fact that there are no European fixtures. We're going to have week breaks between most games, apart from when the cup fixtures kick in. I'd expect a cup run based on less fixturing as well, and we've traditionally been good in the cups. But yeah, I'm not too bothered about it. I like the idea of starting with Arsenal. We start for, I think it's the 9th game in a row at home, which is a nice little privilege that we get with the fixturing. You've got to have, the big clubs, the big stadiums. They look good on TV, even if they're breaking down in person. But no, I'm not too concerned. It's not ideal having City and Liverpool away in the first, what would that be, the first 8 matches.
8. Yeah.
So, for Ruben Amorim, I imagine it's going to create external noise. If you listen to Omar Berrada's interview and saw the general vibe, he is back. So, I mean, it would have to be utter disaster for him to lose his job in November. And when he got the job last year in November, I think he started on the 11th, if memory serves. Yeah, for me, not too worried about that. But, last season, I looked at the fixtures from last season when he took the job. Teams had played 11 games at that stage as well. And between 3rd and 8th, there was 18 and 19 points. So I had a look, tried to map out like what an average result would be if they do have the window that we expect, which is a good window, not the perfect window, but a good window. And I came up with 5 wins, 3 draws, and 3 losses. So that's 18 points. So if that gets you in the mix, I think that's a pretty good start. But they just, we need results and we need performances to match them, because I don't think just getting results is going to be enough. We're going to need to see an improvement in performance. Building on that Aston Villa game, that's got to be the platform that they sort of build on now. So I'm not sure what you think. Maybe I'm always just too much the optimist. But no, I'm not too phased. I think, traditionally get good results at Fulham. Don't always get great results at Burnley. But yeah, I'm more optimistic than pessimistic. What about you?
I am so unfussed about the fixture list. I mean, as you say, everyone plays everyone twice. I'm not sure a title or relegation or European places has ever been decided. I think where it does come into the mix a little bit is in the kind of narrative and the vibe. And given that we finished 15th, he started in November, get through to November, it'd be a year at the club. If he got the same level of results that we got throughout his tenure to date, which is losing half the games, he'd be under incredible pressure, right? And it's not, you can say, hey, we back you. But if it's not getting better, then how long do you back and back and back, right? That's the only worry. I don't actually expect it to get there. I would expect United's results to tick up generally. But that's the only scenario in which I think an easier run to start the season would have been better. Just that he doesn't have a lot of banker credit. And we said this at the end of last season, despite Ten Hag winning the FA Cup, that he had no banker credit, really. You know, he had that emotional bump from winning that, but everyone now looks back and goes, yeah, that was a big mistake, right? You know, we got carried away with the emotional bump. We being the community plus the club and those in charge, right? Anyway, so fixtures leads us into ticket prices. This was the other big announcement of the stratified ticket pricing. It's not full dynamic pricing. You know, how long before...
It's the road to.
It's very much the road to, because it is dynamic, but it's static, right? So it's very much not dynamic, but it's what you'd get. Dynamic is the perfect market. Basically, the prices go up and down based on the demand. Here, they're anticipating demand based on perceived attractiveness of the fixtures. You know, there are two in the bottom category, which is Wolves and Sunderland. Sorry, Wolves and Sunderland. That's the other thing. It's a real diss on those clubs, isn't it? There's the bulk of the fixtures. I think it's 12 in the middle block. And then there's 6 that are the premium price tickets, which in theory could go up to £97. It's a very small proportion of the tickets that will be at that level. This is of standard tickets. So it's not even the ones that are just behind the dugout, because they're going to become executive tickets, which will be even more pricey. So in theory, some people will be paying 97 quid to go see United, which is for a club that for most of its history was incredibly value for money. You know, it sounds like I started going in the 1890s or something, right? I started going in the 80s. I paid less than £2 to go to a game of football, right? And it's not even that long ago, really. It's amazing now that people wouldn't have the same experience that I had, where I could just go when I was a kid, basically, and rip out my ticket from the ticket book and go into the Stretford end, and it'd be less than £2. And you know, there's an awful lot of people be priced out now. It's the people it's really going to impact are those people who are either tourists, you know, and you can say, hey, yay or nay, whether you think this is a good idea. Barcelona and Real Madrid have been doing this for years, where tourists get a different price than the socios, or people who can't afford to buy the season ticket, or can't actually get one because there's a waiting list, and are trying to buy as many tickets as possible to get higher up the waiting list, who will end up being stung for this extra cash.
This isn't a surprise. Ultimately, it's not a surprise.
It's kind of signalled. Yeah.
But the communication of it has been really poor. The consultation, and I'm doing quotation marks for those listening, has been poor. What's the point of saying that you're going to listen to fans if you're going to just drum this out anyway?
Yeah.
It just makes people... like, you can't... It's worse when you pretend that you're listening to someone than just going right along with the plan anyway. It is a move towards dynamic pricing, which is long forecast. The Americanisation of the Premier League has been well underway for a long time. Now, you and I have been very critical of, you know, the Middle East and sports washing, but ultimately the American ownership is a problem for the Premier League, particularly for match-going fans. Something I can't understand, obviously, but have it in my own, you know, Aussie rules here, so I can speak to it a little bit. There's some things I'd like to flip back to you on, but with the dynamic pricing and the Americanisation, you know, I think we have 13 American owners now. With 14, they're going to be able to use voting blocks to get in things that they want. So, for example, if American owners want games to be moved, they're going to be able to vote those in soon enough on their own. So it's a real danger that we're heading towards as a model and as a league that's already probably maxing out on broadcast revenues, as you and I have talked about. We're probably at the apex of that market at the moment without moving into pay-per-view and streaming of games on Netflix, Amazon Prime, things like that. So, or DAZN, who's currently seeing with the Club World Cup, something I don't really want to talk about. But we're getting a really ugly forecast for the future of English football. So,
yeah,
you know, fan groups can say and do as much as they like, but they're not being heard. Obviously, people who stand with the 1958 are very much standing against MUST, or must, because of they feel a lack of inaction. I'm more curious to your point of view on the homegrown match-going fan perspective. You know, we're talking about long-held season ticket holders, like people's grandparents and fathers and mothers, who are getting priced out because it's not possible for them to keep up the increase, and they're facing much steeper increases because they've always historically had a discount. So
yeah.
I'm more curious on your take.
Yeah, and people on fixed incomes, right, who cannot keep up with the price increases. I actually think I am not of the ilk of fans that thinks that must is a waste of time and the only thing that matters is an awful lot of noise on social media or physical protests or whatever, right? In any kind of protest movement, you need dialogue and you need action. And the 1958 group, for all the great stuff they have done, could not enter into the same kind of dialogue with the club that the Supporters Trust does. They just could not do that, right? Like any advocacy group that is more militant and wants to remain more militant could not do that, and the club would not take them as seriously or would not approach them in the same way, right? As a result, because you need to have a trustworthy partner, right? Now, that is not to say that I think must have achieved loads of gains. They're all on the margins. And unfortunately, they're all on the margins because the club has the power here, right? Until, we withdraw our custom or the demand is reduced to the point where there are empty seats in the stands. And through all the dark times over the last 10 years or 20 years of the whole Glazer ownership, that has never happened, right? There's just so much demand there. And for every local that is priced out of going to every game, there's another single match goer from local or wherever that is willing to take their place because it's so attractive as a proposition. I used to go to Barcelona every year. And most years I was able to get tickets through the Socios program, through people I knew. And I've paid €100 plus euros to go to a Copa del Rey game against Real Madrid as well, right? So one of the fools that does that. And this is partly what this model addresses. Now, it's not the full dynamic pricing model, which we've seen at the Club World Cup. We'll see at the World Cup next year, which started out at hundreds and hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, would you like to know how much I've spent? Because I'm
absolutely shit games. This is the Club World Cup, right?
Yep.
And will be the same for the World Cup next year. And went down to so there will have been people at the Miami game, the opening game, who paid $500, sat next to someone who paid $4 because of that dynamic pricing model. And the idea is that you maximize your potential revenue, and you leave no money on the table, which United have done for years and years and years and years, right? If you're a pure capitalist, you'd go, it doesn't make any sense, this model of keeping ticket prices.
Yeah, the freezing.
Yeah, freezing ticket prices because there's so much demand. So, how much have you spent on World Cup tickets?
So, to get a 3-game package, just the...
Oh, you had to buy some NFTs.
Yeah, to guarantee. Well, you're better off using the resale, which is what I use to get a better price. But my friends who paid a little bit more than me, they paid $900 US combined for 2 tickets. So guaranteed access to 2 tickets to those 3 games, that 3-game block. I know that you can buy a ticket to the final, guaranteed access to the final for the country of your choice for $1,500 US, but you lose that money if they don't make the final. It is crazy. And that's only what I've spent with the $900 US for 2 people. A bit less for me, but that's just to guarantee you access to buying those tickets, So that's just there. I have the fortune of being able to do that. But I'm going over, so I need to make sure I'm going. Otherwise, I wouldn't have guaranteed that access.
If you absolutely want to guarantee it with no questions asked about which team is in the final, you have to tickle Gianni's balls. So
I'm very tempted to just go to the Canadian games rather than the American games with the trajectory that the country is on, and just sort of, I don't know, if you looked at Adam Crafton's story, though, I don't really want to get into that discussion too much, being that this is a United pod. But yeah, I have a real moral dilemma with the lack of certain things being advertised and promoted by the current Club World Cup and the things that are being promoted. So
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for a different podcast.
We will certainly do this again because I think it's well worth coming back to what this looks like. Because I think the World Cup looks very, very different now than I'd thought about it. I'd thought about it as a brazenly commercial World Cup. It's got a hint of politics in there, which is very different. But that's for another day. All right, so fixtures, tickets. Berrada did this deep interview with Andy Mitten in United We Stand. A very good get for Andy Mitten. Also talked to Sir Jim Ratcliffe not too long ago. I thought Berrada was pretty honest and straight. Well, we'll find out if he's honest, but he answered every question, it seems, and went into a lot of detail. What are your thoughts on the interview?
Firstly, I think it's really important that people like Ratcliffe and Berrada speak to fanzines. It's really great that Andy does that through his fanzine rather than outlets like The Athletic or mainstream. Just mainstream outlets. It's just really important to keep those fanzines going. Proud subscriber that I have no place to put mine, but I'm waiting for the full interview. But it's very clear from what we've seen that he's a very well-educated and well-spoken man. Has football acumen clearly, so we've got a footballing CEO, which we all already knew. I enjoyed his Tyus Cunha comments. I don't think he's quite going to be Cantona-esque, but if he is, I'll be stoked. I think we all will be. I wanted to ask you about a couple of things. So he says with the club's vision on the football side, there's a clear idea of what we want to do, what players we want to get, how we want to see the team playing, how we're going to integrate academy players, and we're going to go and invest in future talent. I think we're seeing a bit of that already, but the proof will be in the pudding, I think, by the end of the summer, whether they've got a clear vision. I think jury's out on what happened last summer. But there's a different structure in its totality this summer with Will Cox now, the director of football, Vival as the full-time head of recruitment, and then Berrada as that footballing CEO. So I think we'll see a much clearer path this summer than last summer. The 2028 plan is interesting. I was sort of talking about this the other night. I think it's good to have that ambition expectation. It's realistic, but it's ambitious. So for me, people can say, 2028 is a long way away. But that's 3 summers that the club needs to do a lot of change over a lot of things. They should be competing by that point, even if the mistakes are made. I think this summer is very much about clearing things out as much as it is bringing in new talent and rebuilding that squad. He clearly backs Ruben Amorim and trusts him. He did pass it off a little that it wasn't entirely his decision, but he was the one over in Lisbon doing the negotiations. So, the note on transfers was something as I wanted to ask you about that I talked about earlier. So sometimes when you're not quick, it's because you're negotiating and you're trying to make sure you can get the right value for money. So being efficient or quick isn't necessarily the best thing for the club. So we've talked about arrivals and them needing to get it on time. So what did you make of that sort of comment?
I mean, that rings true, right? With how the football market works, sometimes there's a level of chicken that happens that everyone is, well, it's partly a level of chicken who can leave it the latest to get the best deal. It's also a little bit like house buying where there's chains and somebody needs to sell in order to buy, and everyone's playing the same game there, which makes it exceedingly complicated. Yeah, and sometimes slowing down is the right way of getting the thing that you want. That said, there is a football pain that comes from leaving it too late. So if it's later than they go away on tour, that will cause Ruben Amorim a footballing pain. And so it better be worth it in terms of the finances. If that's
delicate risk.
Yeah. I mean, it's why I'm definitely in favour of cutting off the transfer window on the first day of the season, for sure. And so was the Premier League, the clubs in their entirety. It was unfortunate that the rest of Europe was not, right? So the Premier League should have been negotiating with the rest of Europe. Unfortunately, the rest of Europe sees the Premier League as the competitor and wants to do, and a cash cow. Yeah, absolutely. Right. So, that rang very true with how football is. Berrada, I mean, I don't know him. Obviously, I've never met him. He's well regarded in the game. He's come from a commercial side of things. He did partnerships at Barcelona. He did the same at City and expanded it to a more operational role. he's a footballing CEO in that he's been part of football clubs for 15 years now. He's not an ex-player, right? He's not Bayern-style ex-player becomes general manager, which he says as well in that interview, in which he's like, the technical decision was left to the technical people. I was a little bit, what did he mean by that exactly? Because Wilcox wasn't long in the job, really, at that point. Who are the other technical people supporting that decision at that time? And there weren't many, right? So, yeah, I wasn't exactly sure about that one. It does feel like a few of the players have done a similar thing, because Ratcliffe has done a similar thing in interviews where he's kind of poo-pooed it and said, it wasn't my decision to hire Ten Hag or keep him on or sack him. You know, it was the technical people who did that. These mysterious technical people. So it is a little interesting. I wonder, like, I kind of knew where the politics were under Woodward and Arnold. And obviously Joel Glazer was heavily involved, micromanaging stuff. And there was some politics around who had access, right? So this is why Murtaugh was so successful. He played politics really well, apparently. The political dimension has changed very much now because you have a CEO. We'll see how powerful he really is. And then you have two poles of owners. One very hands-on in Ratcliffe, who's apparently been very hands-on. One at a distance, who's now less hands-on, but had been so hands-on as to saying yay or nay to individual pieces of gym equipment previously. So we'll see how that plays out and how powerful Berrada is. My initial instinct when I first saw Berrada do a lot of interviews was he doesn't feel to me like a lot of the CEOs I'd spent a lot of time with over time. And it doesn't mean that you can't grow into that role, right? And he's obviously got something about him. But my initial instinct was, he feels a little bit wet, right? He doesn't have the gravitas that one would expect of a CEO. And I think that's because he's been bumped up, right? Bumped up both from a smaller club in City with much less global scope and bumped up from an operations role to the full CEO role. And I hope maybe this is his kind of coming out thing. And now he's going to, it's him with Brailsford having gone. Wilcox now as the technical director. We put Ashworth behind us. Vivell full-time recruitment person. Like, everything is set. He's now the main man, right? Jean-Claude Blanc isn't there. Brailsford isn't there. Like, it's not day-to-day with Ratcliffe's people. Berrada is the main man.
Yeah, the way I've seen Berrada is the conduit to tying the football and commercial side together, which have long been apart and priority separated. So that's an interesting point about the CEOs. Obviously, he seemed like he was next in line at City, and United got in first and offered him something, and he took it. With Mark Armstrong coming in from PSG to step up the commercial side of operations?
Was it business officer or commercial officer? I can't remember his
I can't remember the official title, but that's how I see it. I see him as the conduit tying football and commercial together, or just being the conduit between them. So, proof's in the pudding. But yeah, everything's going to sit at his feet now. So Ruben Amorim's success or failure will sit with him. And so he is forced to back him in a way, but he doesn't have to make the comments that he's made. So, yeah, I also enjoyed his comments about Johan Cruyff and the 3-4-3, and that it's something you and I have spoken about, people getting a little too caught up in system, because against Aston Villa, there was times where they were deployed in a 4-4-2.
Yeah.
So, again, when you sign players like Matheus Cunha, Bryan, Mbeumo, I have to think about it every time. It's going to ruin me. To me, those are tactically flexible players. So whatever happens with Ruben Amorim, we're signing the right players who are going to be tactically flexible in systems. Yeah. Now, remains to be seen. Still got to get him over the line and sign some other players. But I think we're off to a good start. It's just unfortunate in this moment, in this game of chicken, where I think people are ignoring, besides the fact of the cash cow at City who can just throw chunks of money at other clubs and get deals done. A lot of clubs are waiting for dominoes to fall. They might be, like, I think as far as selling players goes, most European clubs post-pandemic are sell to buy. They don't have that same sort of budget, so they have to constantly keep the wheel churning with sales. So that's just going to take a little bit more time to develop. Obviously, the wages with Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford make them more of an obstacle compared to Garnacho and Antony, who I think will be much easier to move at a good price, or at a reasonable and fair price. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think things just don't move as quickly as we think they do, or as we like to think they do. I just keep a lot of my replies to people on Twitter have just been, it's the 16th of June, it's the 17th of June, it's the 18th of June. Let's just relax.
Let's chill. If it's still like this on the 16th, 17th, 18th of August, we may have cause to panic a little bit more. But yeah, for sure. I practiced Mbeumo quite a bit because I got it wrong, and I got absolutely roasted on TikTok as a result.
Did you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fine. I've got a very thick skin, and sometimes I push back and I have some fun with it. But yeah, it's the usual. It's like it's Mbeumo, you could go check it here. Like, why haven't you done that? To you're an idiot. To why have you ever done podcasting? To you're clearly illegitimate. To kill yourself now. It's the full gamut. So I took all of those suggestions on board, and I've considered them all. I do not quite feel like killing myself. Thank you to
good
Bob 34921 on TikTok for your suggestion, but we'll take that under advisement. If you're not the 15th again next May, maybe I'll take you up on it. Probably not. It's just a game. All right. Nick Cox has left, and it's the second significant departure after Adam Lawrence from the youth setup this summer. Nick Cox, obviously the main man, just seems like I don't know him personally, just seems like, but obviously we've got a few presenters on here, people who've been on here that do know him. Seems like he's like legit, not only knows his job really well, but is like deeply ingrained into the club and club culture, really understands youth football, just a proper football person who really knows his job. He's going to Everton as technical director. It's quite a big step up, obviously. It's a promotion, fair enough sort of thing. Obviously that role is not available to him at United, but it feels like a big blow because he just feels like he's done such a good job given the amount of talent that's coming through at the moment.
Well, someone said to me, with Will Cox going into the director of football, is the technical director job available? But also on top of that, Everton are opening a new stadium. He's got a chance to shape the vision of that football club as they move into hopefully a bigger and better new era for them. I'm not so hopeful for them, but it's an exciting opportunity. It's a natural progression. So I understand that. I think losing him and Adam Lawrence is just a huge blow in one summer, particularly with where the academy has gotten to and the prospects they have coming through. It's a very risky point to be replacing both your under-18s manager and the head of youth development. So what I really liked about Cox is that he understood the club's values, understood Manchester's value to the club. Andy Mitten told a really cool story on Talk of the Devils on today's episode where he actually got everyone together and was asking them questions about Manchester, and he asked Andy to go in and educate them on it because he wanted them to understand what the city meant. And I thought that was really cool. I mean, one thing that I really liked about Nick Cox, maybe it's because I'm a bit corny, is I really liked his tweets. Yeah, when he would he would talk with such pride about the players and the club and the traditions of the club, and I think that is key to that appointment. So it makes you wonder: are they going to go for an internal promotion? Is that person even there now? So he's going to be there for the transition. Yeah. How long will that take? He was obviously involved in recent recruitment, so he had a say in Aiden Heaven, Cheeto Obi, Sekou Kone, Lazale.
Yeah. They all feel like they've worked out pretty well. Yeah. He has a very long gardening leave, I think, so they'll keep him on for a while.
12 months.
Yeah. That long, 12 months. Bloody hell.
The Ashworth period.
Right. So, I mean, like Jason Wilcox, obviously, a pretty big cheese around these circles as well. Did that job at City before he moved up, much like Cox is going at Everton. He went up to technical director at Southampton. I imagine that he's got a black book of fellow youth academy type directors of football that he can call on, both to replace Cox and for Adam Lawrence. It'll be a very attractive job. There'll be lots of people who want that job as well. It's obviously a really key appointment, because especially now that, there's two things about youth football. One is to get players into the first team. Two is to get them good careers. And sometimes that good career comes with letting them go, finding them another club. They move on. They have a good. United have had a fantastic record of getting players into either other Premier League clubs or around the Football League, and they've had good careers as a result. I actually don't know if there's any data, but I've seen data that Arsene Wenger put out about like the percentage of players who by the age of 21 have no professional contract is something like 90%. It's like insane.
Yeah, 94%, I think I saw. Yep.
It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. They join these clubs at age 9, and by the time they're 21, they're washed up and they're no longer in the game. So it tells you how hard it is, let alone becoming a first-team player at Manchester United. Like, let alone that. I know there are so few over the last, pick the numbers, right? There's so few of them that actually go on to have a good career at United. It's how hard it is, right? So it's a super important thing from that perspective. Can you build a pathway? It's also super, and this is a bit cruder, but United have not exploited the youth sales market. I mean, it's partly because we're not regarded. Like, we can kind of be romantic about it, but until you're churning out loads of players who become the next Romeo Lavia that goes from City to Southampton for 5 million and then on to Chelsea for 50 million, right? Until that regularly happens, which hasn't been happening, then you might not be regarded as a conveyor belt for ready-made Premier League talent of a certain ilk, right? That City have done, and Chelsea to a slightly lesser extent, but it's also an important revenue stream as well.
Yeah, I think there was 38 players who were promoted to the first team under his watch, which is a significant achievement in a short period of time. I think we'd both recognise that the academy was stagnating in the previous years prior to his impact, just not having the same turnover. But now, Kobbie Mainoo, Alejandro Garnacho, Harry Mass, many others who have come through in recent years. Well, Harry Mass was from Watford, but, I saw someone saying that United's academy remained England's most productive for 12 straight seasons, with more graduates in professional football than any other club. In 2024, United ranked third in Europe for transitioning academy talent to senior level. And, Nick Cox just got his pro licence as well, which probably forecast he wanted to do bigger things beyond the academy role. So, yeah, it puts a real onus on the club to get the appointment right. Another test of that structure to see if they can get the appointments right. But I think, yeah, as you said, that was a really good point about Will Cox and his knowledge of not only players but people, and to bring someone in who's going to fit the ethos of what the club needs in that role.
And whether it's it might be a coach at City already, it might just be someone he did his pro license with as well. So on a separate note, I did note that Guillem Balaguer, the Spanish journalist, responded to Joey Barton the other day, and Joey Barton said, "There's nobody on the Amazon coverage that knows anything about football." And Balaguer popped up and said, "I know something about football. I've been a journalist for 20 years. And by the way, we did our UEFA B license together, so maybe you remembered that." Yes, Joey. All right. Let's talk about what was going to be the main block of our conversation, but we're 40 minutes into this pod. We haven't done a pod for a week, so there you go. We got a long one, folks. Strikers. And there's, we could think of it holistically. I wrote my Substack sort of thinking about it holistically, or at least thinking about different strategic directions United could take on this one. nqatpod.substack.com. I should say newsletter. We shouldn't brand this evil platform, but there you go. Where did United go from here? We obviously missed out on Delap. It looks like we're missing out on Gyokeres, or Gyokeres, depending on whether you're Hungarian or Swedish. the latest installment of the sort of merry-go-round in the speculation is Ugo Ekitike from Eintracht Frankfurt, who I do like, who I think would drive United fans absolutely fucking crazy, from what I've seen of him, at least, for very Alejandro Garnacho reasons. But where do United go from here? Because we seem to be going up in price with the apparent targets we're looking for. And I do wonder whether, given the finances of the club, any of that will come off and we might end up with Rasmus Højlund up front on the opening day of the coming season. Thoughts?
I'm super torn. I'm really torn on this one. I think one of the biggest problems last season was that there were just departures without arrivals because of the club's financial situation. January was very illustrative of that. You know, Anthony went out on loan, Sancho went out on loan at the start of the season, Rashford went out on loan, no replacements.
Yep.
And it got to the point where we were relying on Cheeto, who wasn't even registered for the Europa League. It was just farcical where the club found themselves by the final day of the season. I'm sorry to say, and I don't really like to take the piss of players, but you know, with Rasmus Højlund, by the end of the season, it was like we were playing with 10 men. We had such issue, both at striker and goalkeeper. It was like half a player, or maybe either you could say 9 men sometimes. They were just struggling to that extent. Just having a replacement, and you know, look at the Villa game again as that template. You put in a replacement level player, a striker who converts an average amount of chances, or just has the confidence to gamble on getting on the ends of those chances. It felt like he didn't have the confidence to even try gambling by the end of the season. I think that just makes a world of difference. So for me, you can't go into the new season without one. But with your signing Cunha and Mbeumo, then all of a sudden, how much can you spend on a striker? What's left for a central midfielder and a goalkeeper, which I think are pretty necessary. Now, there's really good value at goalkeeper and central midfielder. I don't think we've got that same value. You did mention a few alternative targets in your Substack. Samu is my favourite, but he costs as much as Ekitike. So
£85 million release clause. I mean,
yeah. It's the same issue, and I think he's probably the best of the lot because I just don't think that Viktor Osimhen is achievable. Whether you want to talk about his extraordinary wage demands, his entourage who cause all manner of trouble for him and as much an obstacle as anything else, or just trying to negotiate with Napoli. De Laurentiis is like Daniel Levy on steroids.
Does he not have a release clause now? Was
62? 62.
Yeah. 75 million euros, right? So
but
maybe you don't have to negotiate, but it'd only be around the payment structure.
I feel like you'd be negotiating the payments of that, and De Laurentiis
you'd be like, mate, we sent you Scott McTominay, who won you the fucking Serie A. Back the fuck down.
I would hope that there's some good relations between the club, particularly because of the Jadon Sancho negotiations now, which I would really just like to be over. My other concern, you know, obviously how much you spend, but we don't have the answer to this because we keep finding out more and more about the finances. The quarter 3 reports are very illustrative of the strides they're making with operating profit and money in the bank and things like that. It probably showed what we can save simply by loaning players and getting that cash off the books or saving that cash for a year. But does it mean ignoring other priority positions, which I don't think we can do? We can't just sign players for attack. We've got ball progression issues in midfield. We don't have a reasonable partner for either Bruno Fernandes or Kobbie Mainoo. You need one who can play with both, or at least with Mainoo long term, because I think Fernandes ultimately is better in that 10 role. And I think people keep picking their 11s, forgetting that we need a squad. I think eventually we're going to be rotating players again. So as well, one thing I want to touch on as well with the striker situation, I think that there's no doubt that Rasmus Højlund has failed in his 2 years so far. But the position he's been thrust into, and you and I have talked about this before, being asked to be the leading man at such a young age, such a raw stage of his development, the club's failed him.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's enough acknowledgement of that when he does get towed up by fans. Try throwing a player who's scored, 9 goals for Atalanta in Serie A the season before. And we're seeing we know it's a step up. Players who come from those, like the Premier League is so far ahead domestically now, there is going to be an adjustment period. Now, where is Højlund in 12 months if he stays? I don't know. Hopefully, he's back above a replacement level. Hopefully, he's back on track, but we'll see what happens with Inter Milan. The other wild card, and you talked about this, was Marcus Rashford. So, a player who would actually fit pretty well with Cunha and Mbeumo. What I like about Rashford is he can play a multitude of roles up front, so he can play between the two centre-backs is what we're going to be asking of a striker in this system. You need someone who can occupy them, and Højlund just doesn't. So, well, two, or if you're playing three at the back, you need a big physical striker who can occupy those defenders. Osman is the best.
I mean, I was being tongue-in-cheek with that one. I don't think there's going to be a rapprochement there. And
No. Big wild card.
Yeah, it's just throwing it out there. But it's Substack as well. If I'd put that on Twitter, people would have gone fucking mental. But
you don't want to bait people?
No.
It's part of the gig, apparently.
A little bit, yeah.
It's the Goldbridge stick. I got sucked in yesterday.
Yeah. So I don't expect there to be a rapprochement with Rashford or Sancho. Actually, even less likely with Sancho. I think he's burned the club as a whole, whereas Rashford sort of. I mean, Ratcliffe has very much talked about backing Amorim, saying he wants people who are fully on board. Actually, Amorim was not that critical of Rashford. If you listen to what he said, fantastic player, we just couldn't see eye to eye. Very different when it comes to Garnacho. I think there's a little bit more that's going on between them there. They'll all be gone, and it's just about the numbers. And you need to make the numbers add up, because otherwise it's not just this summer, right? You have to think of it on a 3-year cycle, right? So you think of it both in terms of the accounting values, PSR, but also cash. Ratcliffe could throw more money into the club, but that'd be literally throwing money into the Glazers' pocket without new equity. I'm not sure that they're willing to release more equity to Ratcliffe for money into the club that they're not going to personally pocket, right? So I don't expect that to happen either, right? So we're working within the operating bounds of the club, and so we have to think about what we can get for now, but over the next 3 years from PSR point of view and a cash flow perspective. The finances are not that bad, right? The PSR problem comes with all the massive deals we've done. And if we do all the deals that we'd like to do this summer and don't offload Rashford, Sancho, Anthony and Onana for the numbers we'd like to, we'll have a big PSR problem next summer. For sure, right? And given the losses that are coming off the books and the forgiveness that we had from 2 years ago will now disappear. So it kind of stores it up, and you have to think of it on this kind of revolving basis, which is very hard for fans. Why would you think of it like that? You want your shiny toy right now. So it's a difficult one for the club to work through. It's why I think the Ekitike one is just kind of noise. I'd be really shocked and surprised. I mean, Chelsea and Liverpool are in much better position right now to offer same playing environment, because of course Frankfurt in the Champions League. So you'd imagine the player would want to keep at that level. Less cash problems. Chelsea do not have a PSR problem because they're allowed to sell any asset they've got apparently within intra-group disposals for as much as they like, and no one says there's a problem with that. Very interesting, that one. And Liverpool have been quite parsimonious actually as a club compared to their commercial value, which they exceeded United's commercial revenues last year. So yeah, I'd be really surprised. From a playing point of view, I like everything I've seen of him. I mean, obviously he had a bump in the road in his career, failing at Paris Saint-Germain, has kind of reinvented himself, going back to the Bundesliga and done really well. I mean, he was kind of outshone by Oliver Marmoush, to be honest. He went to City, had to kind of change his playing style again, I think, when Marmoush left in the winter. He's a creator. He likes to drop deep. It's a live question, I'd say, if United did do that deal, whether he'd be in Bruno's zone or Cunha's zone. He's a bit left-sided out to in. Very technical player, quick. Not an awesome finisher, I'd say, but the data kind of shows that as well. Would that be the player we want? Samu scored twice against United in the Europa League, of course. Everyone was absolutely like gobsmacked when Atletico sold him, and I think it was for PSR reasons because they'd spent 95 million on Julian Alvarez. Porto got a great deal, but he's got a mega release clause, hasn't he? As most Portuguese.
£84 million, £85 million, one of the two. I can't remember which.
Yeah. And once you go, I mean, I put a bunch of players in my left field suggestion stuff, but I think most of those, whether it's a Pender or any of the others you want to pick, they feel like a little tier 2. They wouldn't be quite the right one. And I don't honestly know what the answer is. I mean, do you have a name that you're looking out there going, yeah, he'd be the one? He'd definitely do it.
No, I thought Jonathan David might be a good stopgap and market opportunity because you just sign him for free. And then when you sign a striker down the line, because I just think you need someone else. You need an alternative option who can handle starting a lot of games. And I liked all the targets you mentioned. Even Ekitike, people are freaking out because of his age. And I just don't think it's right to hold everyone because of that Højlund fear. I don't have that same fear. I actually like Ekitike. I actually think he'd work quite well because the difference, and I think what people probably don't remember entirely when they're thinking about it, is that the goals problem at United, and it is a massive problem, will be solved.
4 goals last season.
Yeah. It's gonna be solved by commission. It's not gonna be one player. So that's why you sign Cunha. That's why you sign Mbeumo. That's why you expect just better all-round performance by having more goal threats. That like Bruno Fernandes had. You take out his penalties, he had XG under performance last season. You'd expect that to return. He missed a lot of gettable chances. He was one of the higher plays and big chances missed. So you expect all those things to sort of correct. You expect positive regression, but you also expect with more quality in the team that it'll get solved. But I also think it's not simply solving the attack. You need a midfielder. One of United's problems with creating chances was winning the ball in midfield and keeping it and progressing the ball. So they could win the ball. Ugarte could run around like a bulldog, but it's just more than that. And I think, there's other priorities. So they have to sort of balance it out. The wing backs and the cutbacks are an important part of that system to high percentage chance creation. So it's more than just a striker. But after those pricey options, there isn't a lot in that mid bracket. So again, you're taking a punt otherwise.
Yeah. And it can't be an £80 million punt unless you feel really, really sure. And I don't know any of the options that are mentioned. Could you say that Samu would definitely convert being in the... before I wrote that particular Substack, I'd written 2,000 words on Viktor Gyokeres and how many players have gone from Portuguese football to English football and succeeded. It's not very many. It's and it's not very many in the last 5 years when the Premier League's just kind of run away in terms of quality.
Does the championship experience make a difference for you?
Not at all.
No.
Because, I had a few people say that to me. It's a good sign. Why? How many championship players have moved up to the Premier League? If that was the case, if we were like, this is the pathway, it's a young development league. It's not. It's full of fucking cloggers who want to smack you, right? It's just completely different style of football. It's not. There's not a smooth pathway. The 3 teams that come up this summer will be favourites to go back down, and that is budget, of course, but also quality. And they're having you can't change 25 players unless you're Forest. And with some of the interesting accounting practices, right? So it's really, really hard. They're just not that. I'm not saying it's not inconceivable that players come out of the Championship and do well in the Premier League, because there are definitely examples, but they're just not that many, right? 2/3 of the Premier League are players from overseas. The reason that is true is not because directors of football and managers everywhere are like, we can't be bothered to look at the Championship. If there was value there, everyone would be dipping into the Championship. It's just a lower quality, right?
And the price, I think the English tax stretches down to the Championship. So you aren't getting the same value that you get on the continent. It just makes more sense. Right. Brighton have just gone and signed a great player from Hellas Verona for like, I think it's 9 million euros.
Right.
And my friends, Nima and Carlos, who do the Italian football pod, they were talking about like that's a disaster for Italian football. But that's what the Premier League can do. They can go shopping in those leagues and pick up bargains. So you're better off using those leagues. My one concern with Gyokeres, because I'm quite high on him compared to a lot of people, is his aerial ability, because I actually think we need aerial ability, because we're heavily reliant on someone like Casemiro, who isn't going to be in the 11 forever. And his weakness clearly is his aerial ability. I'm not worried about his physicality. I'm not worried about his finishing. I'm worried about the less time that he'll have on the ball to finish those chances, because he does take his time. But yeah, that is the concern for. That's why I actually thought he's a good fit for Arsenal, because that's not a concern for them. But they do spam crosses, so you know it's a bit of both. And then someone like Mbeumo, you want someone who's going to get on the end of those crosses. And the perfect fit is Osimhen, but the road to signing him is so complex that's why no club on the continent in a major league has been able to sign him. Sorry to Galatasaray, but that's a simple, like, that was
true.
An escape.
And I don't think they'll do that deal, because if you wanted to just take the money, he most certainly could have gone to Saudi. And so that it may end up late in the window with Osimhen. Yeah, there's still Paris Saint-Germain there, who I mean, for all their brilliance, have not set on Gonçalo Ramos.
Yes, right? that's yes. Good. Yeah. I forgot about him.
Yeah. I mean, and he's an option. I don't think as a purchase for United, but as a loan. Just as a wild card option, like to loan him would be reasonable at a 10 million euro loan fee for the year, cover his wages, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
While we wait for whoever comes in summer 2026. Yeah. It is a difficult one for United. So, I mean, I agree that United's problems in scoring goals are not solely about strikers. It's building up from the back, and we lost a lot when Martinez got injured. We don't know how he'll come back. I think Aiden Heaven, if they feel comfortable with his defending, makes a big difference in his ball progression. So does Tyler Fredrickson. We'll see whether he actually stays or goes on loan somewhere.
I reckon he'll be sold.
Yeah, sold is an interesting one. It depends. If they don't believe he's coming into the first team. Then,
I always thought that was a shop window promotion.
Yeah. But he's a very good passer of the ball, is my point. Yeah. So they need a ball progressor, and they need a ball progressor out of central midfield. That's less of a problem with Bruno there, but obviously the balance of who you play him with is quite tricky when you're only playing with a two in there, because it's not necessarily Mainu's forte to play in a double pivot, being the defensive one alongside Bruno. Uarte maybe, but he obviously can't progress the ball. So it's just long way of saying it's a holistic problem, not just about buying a striker. Then again, if you fix all the other problems, if you said, hey, we're not going to spend the money on a striker, we're going to spend it everywhere else, and you progress the ball into the final third, and you're underperforming your XG as a team because Rasmus Højlund is on the end of them and his confidence in the toilet, and there's nothing to say that. I liked a lot of it. I spent most of my time on this pod saying I think he's got fantastic raw materials. I still believe it. I just wonder whether his confidence is so destroyed that there's no way of finding it again without moving to another club.
My one concern is you can underperform your XG, maybe you can overperform it, but if you don't get on the end of chances, it doesn't even come under.
Yeah. You never get the XG.
So, yeah.
Yeah, very true. All right. We are on the hour. Everyone, thanks for sticking with my raspy voice. If you'd like to hear me on 0898 NQAT Pod, I'll be there at £5 a minute. No, I won't. Well, I mean, maybe I would. £5 a minute. You listen to me talk football for no.
You can get money for anything these days. If you include maybe pictures of your feet, you might be all right. There's a market for everything.
There certainly is, except for Manchester United players who've failed. Not much of a market for them. Sadly, it's the story of our last decade. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. If you could hit subscribe if you're in the apps, that'd be awesome. It'll be in your feed or on YouTube. We will be making some changes to our YouTube feed. Not massive. Just taking in some recommendations. Very much appreciate it. And Yeah, you may see our ugly mugs on the thumbnails. Very disappointing that we have to do that. Yeah, we're making some shocked faces or something like that.
You have to do poses or something. I see people doing them in other people's photos.
You're supposed to have a library of them. It's just All right. On that note, yeah, we'll see you soon.